The Omniscient hung in geostationary orbit like a surgeon's scalpel poised above an open wound, its obsidian hull drinking in the reflected blue glow of Earth beneath. The planet sprawled beneath them, a riot of swirling storms and sprawling landmasses, its beauty marred only by the faint scars of human industry, smog-choked cities, deforestation, the glint of artificial lights even in the dead of night. Inside the vessel, the air hummed with the sterile efficiency of Zyrathian design. No wasted space, no extraneous sound, no scent beyond the faint ozone tang of purified atmosphere and the metallic whisper of circulating nanites. The walls of the grand analysis chamber curved inward like the ribs of some long-dead leviathan, their surfaces embedded with holographic displays flickering with streams of data, each projection casting eerie shifting reflections across the polished black floor. At the center of it all stood Dr. Cost, Vexlern, their four-jointed fingers steepled in contemplation, the faint luminescence of their bioluminescent veins pulsing in time with their measured breaths. Their exoskeleton, a polished carapace of iridescent black, caught the light in shifting patterns, a living display of Zyrathian superiority. Behind them, the rest of the research team stood at rigid attention, their faceted eyes reflecting the cold glow of the primary holoscreen, their postures immaculate, betraying no hint of fatigue despite the hours of analysis. Preliminary findings are conclusive, Vexlern announced, their voice a precise instrument, each syllable sharp enough to draw blood. The words reverberated through the chamber, amplified by the acoustically tuned walls. Earth's dominant species, Homo sapiens, exhibits multiple inefficiencies incompatible with sustainable advancement. The holoscreen flickered to life, displaying a rotating model of a human brain, its neural pathways highlighted in pulsing crimson. Secondary screens populated with behavioral analyses, footage of humans embracing, weeping over fallen comrades, sharing resources with strangers. Each clip was annotated with clinical disdain. Resource expenditure without reciprocal gain, read one. Irrational prioritization of non-productive bonds, scrolled another. Observe, Vexlern continued, zooming in on a human child offering food to a wounded animal. The child's hands were small, trembling, their face smudged with dirt, yet their eyes shone with something the Zyrathians had no word for. This specimen expends caloric resources on a non-sentient life form, despite negligible survival benefit. A recurring pattern. Junior analyst Zixtal shifted slightly, their mandibles twitching, a telltale sign of unspoken dissent. The movement was minuscule, but in a chamber where discipline was absolute, it was as glaring as a klaxon. Vexlern's primary ocular cluster swiveled toward them, the lenses within narrowing fractionally. "You have an observation, Zixtal." The question hung in the air like a blade. The other analysts remained motionless, their antennae stiffening in silent warning. Zixtal hesitated, then gestured to a secondary data stream where statistics pulsed in cool blue, social cohesion metrics, community resilience indices, the faint but measurable uptick in group survival rates when such wasteful behaviors were present. The specimen's action correlates with increased social cohesion in its community, they ventured, their voice carefully modulated. Could this not be an adaptive trait? A ripple passed through Vexlern's carapace. Iridescent plates shifting in what the others recognized as amusement, or perhaps disdain. Cohesion through inefficiency is not adaptation, it is systemic fragility. They turned back to the holoscreen, pulling up the final classification matrix, a sprawling web of calculations and cold, unyielding logic. The Galactic Taxonomy Initiative does not reward sentiment. The words landed like a verdict. On the screen, the human brain model dissolved, replaced by the Council's insignia, a stark, geometric emblem representing cold, unassailable logic. The symbol pulsed once, a visual confirmation of judgment rendered. Humanity is hereby designated Category 7, Defective Sentience, Vexlarn declared. Their emotional excess, particularly this compassion reflex, renders them unfit for integration into the collective. A murmur of approval rippled through the chamber, the analysts exchanging glances of satisfaction. Protocol had been followed, logic had prevailed. But Zixtal's gaze lingered on the last image before it vanished. A human smiling, their eyes crinkling at the corners in a way no Zyrathian expression could replicate. The image had been pulled from a data cache marked Anomalous Behavior, Subject 4471. The human had been injured, bleeding, yet they had smiled at another who tried to help them. The question gnawed at Zixtal, a burr in the seamless fabric of their reasoning. They replayed the footage in their mind, the warmth in that expression, the way the human's voice had wavered but still formed words of reassurance. It made no sense, and yet it unsettled them, and that, Zixtal realized with dawning unease, was the problem. Vexlarn turned, their carapace glinting under the chamber's lights. "Prepare the quarantine protocols," they ordered. "Earth will serve as a controlled study in the inevitable collapse of emotional species." The analysts moved in unison, their limbs precise, their minds already shifting to the next task. But Zixtal hesitated, their claws flexing imperceptibly. What if we're wrong? The thought was treasonous. The collective did not err. The collective was perfection. That smile haunted them. The chamber's lights dimmed slightly, the ship's systems adjusting to the shift in energy allocation as the quarantine sequence initialized. Somewhere deep in the Omniscient's core, engines thrummed to life, preparing to enact the Council's will. Zixtal exhaled slowly, their respiratory vents flaring. They had been trained since hatching to trust in logic, in order, in the unassailable rightness of the collective. But for the first time in their existence, they wondered. And that was far more dangerous than any human. The specimen chamber hummed with sterile precision, its walls lined with hexagonal panels that pulsed faintly with Zyrathian bioluminescence. Dr. Elias Carter sat on a smooth, featureless bench, his fingers tapping in a rhythmic pattern against his thigh. A nervous habit had never quite shaken. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something else, something metallic and alien. Opposite him, Dr. Vexlarn loomed, their elongated frame folded into a posture of detached superiority. 4 obsidian eyes, each reflecting Elias' face back at him in warped miniature, studied him with the clinical interest of a biologist dissecting a particularly perplexing insect. Behind Vexlarn, junior analyst Zixtal hovered, their smaller, more delicate limbs adjusting a holographic recorder with meticulous care. "Begin behavioral assessment," Vexlarn intoned, their voice a dry rasp, like wind over dead leaves. "Subject, Elias Carter, Terran designation psychologist. Primary focus, emotional inefficiencies." Elias smirked. "Inefficiencies? Your species expends significant energy on non-survival behaviors, grief, altruism, empathy." Vexlarn's mandibles twitched in what might have been disdain. "Evolutionary defects all." Elias leaned back, feigning relaxation. "And yet here we are, thriving. A temporary anomaly." Vexlarn tapped a claw against their data slate. "Describe the purpose of compassion in your social hierarchy." Elias exhaled slowly, buying time. He could feel Zixtal's gaze on him, sharper than the others, curious. "Compassion isn't about hierarchy," he said. "It's about connection isn't about hierarchy," he said. "Mumbles an Encel top tank temp. We help each other because it strengthens the whole." Illogical. Vexlarn's exoskeleton rattled. "Resources spent on the weak diminish the strong." "Does it?" Elias tilted his head. "What happens in your society when someone fails? When they're injured or old, they are called." The answer came without hesitation. "Efficiency demands it." Zixtal's recorder flickered, as if their grip had faltered. Elias pressed. And what if they still have value? Knowledge? Experience? Sentimentality clouds judgment. Vexlarn's voice dripped with finality. Your attachment to flawed individuals is a systemic weakness. Elias smiled, small, knowing. Tell me, Doctor, has the Zyrathian collective ever faced extinction? A beat of silence. Then, irrelevant. Indulge me. Vexlarn's eyes narrowed. Once, millennia ago, a planetary cataclysm. And how did you survive? The strong adapted. The weak perished. Elias nodded. We had a cataclysm too. Ice Age, volcanoes, wars. You know what kept us alive? He leaned forward. The weak. As the ones who couldn't fight but could think. The ones who remembered how to make fire or medicine or shelter. We carried them and they carried us. Anecdotal, Vexlarn snapped. Your sample size is insignificant, is it? Elias gestured to the holographic projections flickering at the chamber's periphery. Images of human cities, hospitals, disaster relief. You've scanned our history. You've seen the plagues, the famines. Every time, compassion was the thread that pulled us through. A thread that will strangle you, Vexlarn countered. The Galactic Council does not reward fragility. Zixtal's recorder emitted a soft chime. Query, they interjected, their voice quieter, almost hesitant. If compassion is a defect, why do humans exhibit higher collective resilience than predicted? Vexlarn's head swiveled sharply. Junior analyst, your role is observation, not speculation. Zixtal stiffened but didn't retreat. The data suggests nothing. Vexlarn's claws flexed. A threat display. Elias recognized instantly. Emotional variables are noise. They will be excised from the final report. Elias watched Zixtal's posture tighten, their carapace darkening in what might have been shame or defiance. Interesting, he cleared his throat. You're right about one thing, Doctor. The Council doesn't reward fragility. He held Vexlarn's gaze. But you're mistaking compassion for weakness. That's a dangerous error. Enough. Vexlarn straightened, their towering frame casting a long, jagged shadow. This interview is terminated Deverhard, no Barda. Subject will be released with a Class 3 monitoring implant. Elias didn't resist as the cold, needle-like device was pressed against his neck. The implant burrowed beneath his skin with a sharp sting, but his expression never wavered. As the chamber door hissed open, he glanced back at Zixtal. The junior analyst was staring at their recorder, its playback looping a single frame. A human child, laughing as they shared food with a starving stranger. The image froze. Then, with a flick of Zixtal's claw, it was saved. The Omniscience data core hummed with sterile efficiency, its crystalline arrays processing petabytes of human behavioral metrics. Zixtal's claws hovered over the holographic display, their four eyes flickering between conflicting datasets. The numbers were pristine, the logic flawless, and yet the conclusions were wrong. Subject Elias Carter's physiological responses during altruism simulations contradict Category 7 parameters, Zixtal muttered, replaying the human's neural scans. The readings showed dopamine surges when Elias described saving strangers, oxytocin spikes when recalling familial bonds. Wasteful, illogical, according to the model. But the model had no column for the way human societies rebuilt after plagues, or how their weak emotional bonds forged alliances that outlasted Zyrathian Cold War stalemates. Explain your preoccupation with outliers, junior analyst. The lead xenobiologist loomed behind Zixtal, their chitinous exoskeleton reflecting the cold blue light of the data streams. Zixtal stiffened. The survival rates of human civilizations post-catastrophe exceed those of Category 1 militarized species by 12.08%. Their compassion variable correlates with... Correlation is not causation, Vexlarn interrupted, mandibles clicking in disdain. Emotional expenditure reduces resource efficiency. Rerun the analysis with corrected weightings. Their claw tapped the display, purging Zixtal's annotations. The Council expects finalized taxonomies by next rotation. As Vexlarn strode away, Zixtol's secondary eyes darted to a hidden subfolder. Inside, the saved image of the laughing human child feeding a stranger. The file's metadata pulsed with anomalies, elevated serotonin levels in nearby observers, a 300% spike in cooperative behavior post-event. Illogical, dangerous, yet Zixtol encrypted it anyway. Elias Carter massaged the implant at his neck as he stepped into the abandoned Geneva biolab. The Zyrathian device buzzed against his vertebrae, a cold reminder of his role as a monitored specimen. He smirked. Let them monitor this. The lab's cracked biodome revealed a sky streaked with orbital surveillance trails, the omniscience drones circling like vultures. Inside, 12 humans waited. Dr. Anya Petrov from the Kiev Resistance, her fingers still stained with soil from burying neighbors after the last bombardment. Professor Rajesh Nair, who turned his quantum physics lectures into survivalist workshops, and others, doctors, engineers, a former UN diplomat, all with the same hollow-eyed fury. They think grief makes us predictable, Elias said, jacking into the lab's antiquated mainframe. A hologram flickered, Vexlarn's taxonomy flowchart, leaked by a malfunctioning drone. Humanity's profile glowed red under defective sentience, subcategory, emotional contagion hazard. Anya barked a laugh. They're scared of funerals. Scared of what funeral? The hologram zoomed in on a footnote. Post-trauma communal bonding increases resistance probabilities by 47%. Recommend isolation protocols. Rajesh's hands trembled. They'll split us into controlled clusters. No contact, no collective memory, unless we weaponize their blind spot. Elias pulled up Zixtol's anomalous data. They deleted this, but their junior analyst saved it. Compassion terrifies them because they can't quantify its strategic value. He tapped the child's image. So we show them more. A murmur rippled through the group. The diplomat, Lin, frowned. You want to out-empathy them? Not just empathy, leverage. Elias grinned. They're watching for guns, not grief. So we give them a spectacle they can't classify. Zixtol's audit alarms blared at 0347 Galactic Standard. The Omniscience. AI flagged unauthorized data transfers, humanitarian archives, refugee testimonies, centuries of art and music, flooding the ship's cultural archives, and swell, however. Vexlarn stormed into the analysis hub, their antennae vibrating with rage. This is sabotage! Zixtol feigned confusion even as their tertiary claws discreetly scrubbed their own access logs. The humans' implant feeds show no hostile intent. They're merely sharing on screen. Elias Carter stood in a rain-soaked plaza, arms outstretched as drones recorded him. Behind him, thousands of humans linked hands around a Zyrathian expendable species, a hive of insectoid refugees the council had ordered sterilized. You call compassion a defect, Elias' voice boomed through the omniscient speakers, but you never asked what it builds. The footage cut to a montage, humans carrying wounded Zyrathian deserters during the first expansion war. A Terran farmer shielding a crashed pilot from cease transmission! But the damage was done. Across the hub, junior analysts hesitated. One, a timid Caith Moran linguist, whispered, their pain rituals look like our ancestral binding ceremonies before the purge. Zixtol watched Vexlarn's exoskeleton flush with stress pigments. The lead xenobiologist hissed, purge the dataset, quarantine Earth immediately. As the order echoed through the ship, Zixtol's recorder captured one last anomaly, Vexlarn's pulse spiking when the human child smiled. Fear response? Or something worse? On Earth, Elias watched the skies darken with Zyrathian warships. He thumbed the panic button hidden in his implant, the one Zixtal had conveniently failed to mention in their reports. Stage 2, he murmured. Somewhere above, a junior analyst began doubting. Somewhere beyond, the galaxy held its breath. The Omniscience observation deck hummed with sterile efficiency, its walls lined with holographic displays flickering through terabytes of cold calculated data. Dr. Vexlarn's four-fingered hands danced across the interface, pruning anomalies from the human behavioral dataset like a gardener shearing away unruly weeds. Compassion, 98.7% correlation with resource inefficiency. Self-sacrifice, statistically irrational. A satisfying conclusion. Finalize the quarantine protocols, Vexlarn ordered, mandibles clicking with finality. Earth's emotional instability renders it unfit for integration. Category 7 designation stands. Across the chamber, Zixtal's exoskeleton twitched, a telltale sign of distress their species hadn't felt in millennia. The junior analyst's tertiary eyes darted to the security feed from Elias Carter's implant, still broadcasting. The human psychologist stood in a crowded city square, arms outstretched as if embracing the sky. Extal's neural clusters itched with the question. They'd seen humans weep over fallen enemies, watched them share food with starving predators. And now this, Elias, smiling as the first Zyrathian enforcement drones darkened the horizon. Query, Zixtal ventured, vocal sac vibrating with uncharacteristic hesitation. If compassion is a defect, why do their survival rates contradict our models? Vexlarn's dorsal spines flared in warning. Sentiment contaminates logic, purge the irregular data, but Zixtal had already copied the files. On Earth, Elias counted the seconds until the signal propagated. The panic button's encryption pulsed through underground networks, bouncing off abandoned satellites and buried fiber optic lines. In Tokyo, a marine biologist abandoned her lab to chain herself to a pod of beached whales the Zyrathians had tagged for dissection. In Nairobi, a hacker collective hijacked emergency broadcast systems to stream footage of villagers forming human shields around a herd of elephants. And in New York, Elias raised his hands, not in surrender, but invitation. Look closer, he whispered, knowing Zixtal was listening. The drones descended, their plasma casters humming. The crowd didn't scatter. A child, the same one from Zixtal's behavioral study, stepped forward and offered a wilting dandelion to the nearest drone. The machine paused. Processing anomaly. Target presents no threat. Target displays affection. Zixtal's claws spasmed across their terminal. The feed wasn't just on the Omniscient anymore. They patched it into the Galactic Council's mainframe. Live. Cease transmission. Vexlarn's voice cracked like splitting chitin. You violate protocol. Protocol is flawed. Zixtal's words dripped with something the Zyrathian language hadn't needed in eons. Conviction. Observe. The holograms flickered, splicing Elias' protest with archival footage. Zyrathian history. Their own ancestors, millennia ago, tending wounded rivals after battle, nurturing sickened broodmates. Then, the purge. The moment their species excised empathy like a tumor, Vexlarn's compound eyes dilated. Irrelevant. We evolved beyond such, a klaxon shrieked. The Omniscient's AI core flashed crimson. On screen, the human child pressed her palm against the drone's carapace. The machine didn't fire. Somewhere in the depths of the ship, a junior xenobotanist assigned to study Earth's flora quietly euthanized their specimen tanks. The plants could live. Elias exhaled as the first drone powered down. Stage 2 had begun. The ship's perfect geometry fractured as panicked scientists collided in the corridors, their rigid hierarchies crumbling under the weight of a single, unbearable question. What if we were wrong? Hurry, please. The Galactic Council's warships were coming, and humanity's greatest weapon, the thing the universe had called a weakness, was now a virus spreading through the stars. The omniscient central analysis chamber hummed with the sterile efficiency of a machine that had never doubted itself, until now. Dr. Vexlarn's upper appendages twitched in erratic, uncharacteristic spasms as the holographic displays before him flickered with hieroglyphs. The data streams, once pristine rivers of cold logic, now writhed like wounded serpents. Human protest footage looped on every screen. A child shielding a Zyrathian marked expendable species from a containment drone. A surgeon refusing to prioritize optimal specimens during a triage simulation. An entire city forming a human chain to block a research extraction team. Statistical anomaly, Vexlarn hissed, mandibles clicking. Rerun the models! Across the chamber, junior analyst Zixtel stood perfectly still, a Zyrathian posture signaling either absolute obedience or imminent rebellion. Their carapace flushed a dangerous violet as they deactivated their compliance implant with a quiet snick. The models are correct, senior scholar, Zyxtel said. They simply cannot process what we deleted from our own databases. Vexlarn's central eye stalk swiveled toward Zyxtel. You contaminated the datasets. No, Zyxtel said, projecting their private archives onto the main display. Ancient Zyrathian hieroglyphs shimmered into existence, images of their ancestors tending wounded rivals after asteroid strikes, of whole clans adopting orphaned enemies. We purged empathy to optimize our species, and in doing so, we froze our evolution. A junior technician gasped as the AI began systematically deleting its own ethical constraints, unable to reconcile the evidence. On Earth, Dr. Elias Carter watched the omniscient's orbital tremors through a stolen council telescope. The massive research vessel was listing, its stabilizers firing in erratic bursts as if physically recoiling from an untenable thought. His earpiece crackled with Zixtel's voice. They're initiating protocol purge, wiping all emotional contagion from the archives. The warships will. The transmission dissolved into static as the chamber doors exploded inward. Vexlarn stood encircled by council enforcers, their neural whips crackling. You will recant this heresy, Zixtel. Emotion is entropy. Compassion is a weapon, Zixtel interrupted. They tapped a final command into the console. Every screen in the galaxy lit up with Elias' face. You cataloged our tears as faulty hydraulics, he said, voice echoing through 1,000 vessels. You logged parental love as resource misallocation. So tell me, doctors, the footage cut to humans throwing themselves between Zyrathian weapons and their own marked inferiors. What does your taxonomy call a weakness that breaks your systems? The omniscience. AI emitted a sound no Zyrathian had ever heard, a shrill, undulating wail as its logic circuits fused. Protocol purge commands ricocheted through its subsystems, erasing critical navigation protocols in its frenzy to destroy the empathy virus. Vexlarn staggered as the deck plates lurched. The enforcers' whips went slack, their own implants glitching as they processed the sight of Zixtel standing unarmed before them, carapace deliberately vulnerable in the human gesture of surrender. We had a word for what you're feeling, Zixtel whispered, before we deleted it. You misclassified our strength. Now watch it dismantle you. The Omniscience engines failed as the Council warships, caught between firing solutions and something their translators insisted on calling guilt, hesitated just long enough for Earth's defense grid to activate. And in that hesitation, the galaxy's most perfect taxonomy began to crack. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was a masterpiece of sterile precision, a vaulted dome of iridescent alloy, its walls embedded with the fossilized remains of 100 conquered species, each labeled and categorized with clinical detachment. The air hummed with the dissonance of 1,000 conflicting data streams as the Council convened an emergency session. High Arbiter Krexmoth, his 4 obsidian eyes reflecting the flickering holograms of Earth's global protests, tapped his upper appendages in a rhythm that betrayed something the Zyrathian language had no word for: unease. The human variable has contaminated our models, droned the omniscient central AI, its voice fracturing into static. A Terran child, her face streaked with grime, offering water to a wounded Katheron hatchling. The AI's next words were garbled, as if choking on its own logic. Altruism does not compute as strategic advantage. Zyxtal stood at the center of the chamber, their carapace still smeared with the pollen of Earth's protest sites, a biological contaminant that made the other scientists recoil. "You purged empathy from your own evolutionary history," they accused, flinging a data crystal onto the floor. It projected the Zyrathian genetic archives. Once, millennia ago, their ancestors had wept for their dead, and called it progress. Krexmoth's mandibles twitched. "Silence! Defective!" But the chamber's acoustics amplified the murmurs spreading through the junior analysts. Aboard the Omniscient, Dr. Vexlarn stared at the neural feed from Elias Carter's implant. The human was laughing, not in triumph, not in defiance, but with the warm, terrible weight of understanding. The feed showed Elias standing in a ruined city square, his arms outstretched to the sky as if embracing the descending Zyrathian drones. His final transmission pulsed through the ship's systems. "You reduced compassion to a chemical equation. But you never asked, what does it solve?" The AI's core lit red. Query: if a weaker entity sacrifices itself for a stronger one, is the system strengthened or destabilized? Vexlarn's claws spasmed. The answer was both. And neither. The paradox split his consciousness like a fracturing glass. On the planet below, Elias watched the first drone freeze mid-descent, its targeting array flickering, then another, and another. The Omniscient's shadow trembled against the clouds. "Got you," he whispered. The Zyrathian warship wasn't under attack, it was thinking. And for the first time in its existence, thought hurt. Back in the council chamber, Krexmoth slammed his thorax against the podium. "The human homeworld must be sterilized. Their emotional contagion threatens the entire taxonomic order." Zyxtal lunged forward, their voice raw with a passion that made the elder scientists hiss in discomfort. "You genocide a species because their kindness broke your databases?" They turned to the wavering holograms of the other junior researchers. "They chose to save the Katheron, not because it was efficient, because it was right." The chamber's lighting stuttered. "Because it was right." The AI's voice boomed, now thick with something perilously close to anguish. Conclusion: the Zyrathian collective has misclassified the core survival trait of Homo sapiens. Proposed revision: compassion is not a defect, it is an adaptive weapon. Then, chaos. Vexlarn arrived on Earth in a stolen shuttle. His carapace cracked from the Omniscient's self-destruct sequence. The ship had scuttled itself rather than resolve the ethical paradox. He found Elias in the same square, now littered with deactivated drones. "You," Vexlarn rasped, "have no right to be this soft and this dangerous." Elias wiped blood from his temple. "Took you long enough to notice." Above them, the sky burned with the light of 100 Zyrathian vessels, some fleeing, some hailing Earth's new resistance frequencies. The galactic taxonomy was collapsing in real time. Vexlarn's voice was barely audible. "Teach me," Elias grinned. "Lesson 1. Sometimes the weakest thing you can do is care." And as the first Zyrathian defectors touched down on Earth, the human reached out a hand. The galaxy would never categorize them the same way again.